Amy Carmichael was born in County Down, Ireland in 1867. When she was in her 20s, she founded the Welcome Evangelical Church in Belfast, which was a small church that ministered primarily to young working-class women. Amy worked with the women there until 1887, when she became convinced that her calling in life was to become a missionary. Her desire was complicated due to the fact that she suffered from neuralgia, which caused her a near-constant aching in her body that could leave her bedridden for days. Many of her friends tried to convince her that her health was too bad to go overseas, but she ignored them. She traveled first to Japan, where she worked with local missionaries for over a year, before finally settling in India. There she started a ministry to spiritually serve the people of Tamil Nadu. Amy tried to become part of the local culture, wearing Indian clothing and sometimes dyeing her skin brown with coffee. In this way, she was able to enter unobtrusively into the lives of the people around her. All this is well and good, but what really takes her the next step, what makes her a hero whose story is worth telling, is what happened next in her life. Amy had no other desire than to preach Christianity to the people of India, but her life took a different turn when she had an unexpected encounter with the practice of temple prostitution. At this time in India, it was a common practice for some girls to be given to a temple and dedicated to their deity. A ceremony was performed and they were ritually married to that deity. Their typical duties included fulfilling the sexual needs of the priests and of worshippers who came to the temple. Sleeping with them was considered to be an act of worship, as they are symbolically sleeping with the deity. Most girls were sold to the temple as young children. Often a rich temple patron would donate money to pay for the child's ceremony, and in return were granted the privilege of being the first to have sex with them. The typical age that girls began practicing their duties was around 12 years old. There is no sugarcoating this. These children were taken in and abused. The priests used them however they wished, and if they complained, they were reminded of their duty to their God. If they tried to escape, they were hunted down, beaten, and returned to work. Most missionaries at the time were unaware of the practice. Most people in general were unaware of exactly what happened to these girls behind closed doors. Amy knew as little as anyone else, until a young girl named Pina escaped from the temple and fled for her life. Pina had attempted to escape once before, and had fled to her mother. Her mother, fearing that the gods would punish her, returned Pina to the temple. Pina's hands were branded with hot irons as a punishment for running away. At the time of her second escape, she was only 7 years old. This time she found a sympathetic woman who brought her to Amy. Amy took Pina in for the night and talked with her. Pina slowly explained to Amy what kind of life she left behind, and what they would do to her in the temple. When the authorities came looking for Pina, Amy refused to hand her over. Despite threats of violence, she stood her ground and cared for Pina. Soon her reputation spread, and other runaways took shelter in her home. Within 3 months, Amy was caring for 4 more children. As more children came to her for shelter, Amy raised money to build an orphanage. She dedicated herself to become a mother to the children she rescued. She cared for their physical and spiritual needs, finding time to personally care for each one. The children called her Amma, which means mother in the Tamil language. Soon everyone knew her by that name. She became an Amma to all who needed one. She not only took in escaped temple prostitutes, but also children who had been abandoned, or whose parents had died without leaving any resources to care for them. Infanticide was a common practice at the time, and unwanted children would be left outside to die of exposure as babies. Amy would often walk to villages dozens of miles away in order to rescue these unwanted children. Over time, her organization expanded to include the construction of schools to educate the children, as well as a hospital. Amy spent the last 55 years of her life working in India. When she died, at the age of 83, she requested that her grave not be marked by a tombstone. After her burial, her children placed a bird bath above her grave, inscribed with the word, Amma. In the end, Amy Carmichael's orphanage rescued and cared for over 1,000 children. The orphanage, along with the schools and hospitals she constructed, continue to operate to this day. The whole facility is now run by some of her children who grew up in the orphanage. They continue to take in abandoned children to this day. The quote that Amy Carmichael is perhaps best known for is this: "One can give without loving, but one cannot love without giving." When many of her children were asked what had drawn them to her, they answered, "It was love. Amma loved us."